I didn't know. I literally didn't know. I literally did not know that the end goal is to publish.
Yeah.
There's a whole video in and of itself on that.
Yeah.
Hi there, we're Dr. X.
Dr. Y.
And Dr. Z. And we're from PhDone, the channel where we talk about all things PhD and beyond.
Today's video, we bring you a brief introduction to who we are and what we're about on this channel. After which, we'll also delve into our own experiences of doing a PhD. So we want to bring you the honest lowdown on what led us to pursue PhDs, whether it really lived up to our expectations, and any challenges we face and regrets that we might hold. All right, let's start with who we are. Dr. X, would you please do the honors?
Of course. So we are postdoc at a Australian university, and we're about 1 to 3 years out of our PhD. We met each other during our PhD and continue to be friends and colleagues since. And in the area of medicine.
And what are we about?
What this channel is about is basically we wanted to share our experiences about what academia is about, because there's not a lot of information out there for PhD students who are just starting, and we wanted to kind of just be real about the academic experience, because it's kind of a niche area, you don't hear a lot about it. And what do you guys think?
And when I first started my PhD, I looked up on the internet, and there isn't someone that's just talking about their experiences in a really personal way. There's all these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, but you don't really get to feel the PhD journey.
I feel like we did a lot of complaining to each other and supporting each other through it. And we thought, why not? Why not open it up to everyone else? You might be having kind of the same issues and questions. All right, so should we jump into the discussion for today? So let's start off with why we wanted to do a PhD in the first place.
So the reason why I wanted to do a PhD in the first place, so I was thinking about this a lot. I think retrospectively, and if I want to be super profound about it, it's because I wanted to I was really interested in science, and I wanted to kind of leave a legacy. And I wanted to do something that was going to change the world and win the Nobel Prize. But then, if I'm going to be real about it, it's because I couldn't find a job after I graduated. So I did my honors, and then I tried to apply for all these different jobs, and nobody wanted me. And because, because I don't know if this is too much to share. I did a psych degree, and I did honors, and after a psych degree, usually you either do clinical psychology, or you if you work for corporate, you go to work for HR or whatever. But I didn't want to do either of those things. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to sort of get a job in the area. And then I saw this PhD scholarship ad come up. And so that's what I ended up applying for. And then I got in. And then that's where I went from there.
But you did want to become a researcher, though. I think that before applying for a job, you were like, oh, I'm going to be this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I was interested, but I didn't really know too much about the research pathway other than just seeing what my professors did. And I didn't think I was super interested in doing that because I didn't know where it would lead. And I didn't really want to be a professor necessarily. But at the same time, there was I didn't know what else was out there. And then when I tried applying, no one wanted me. And so yeah, that's pretty much what led me to be where I am now. And just on a tangent, I remember the interview process for a PhD being unnecessarily difficult. It was way harder than it should have been. I think so, yeah, because my panel was my supervisor, the postdoc, and the head of school, and I all had these. Yeah, it was and I had all these poker faces on, and they asked me really hard stats questions that just I didn't expect, and I pretty much didn't think I was gonna get it. When I came out of there.
Unnecessary.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Any stats questions.
Really? I know one about.
We're kind of we're in sister projects.
Yeah, but I know that the same. So our friend who did the same project as me, who had the same supervisor, she also had the same experience, and she came out of there. And she was like, I don't think I got it either. I don't know why they were being so tough. I just
Maybe they just wanted to see how you would perform.
Yeah, I performed poorly, but they still hired me.
You're the one they were looking for.
Because I didn't even answer. They were like, what did you do for your honors? And I freaking blanked out at that time, and I couldn't remember. I was like, oh yeah, it was like super complicated. I don't want to get into it. I still got it.
Actually, come to think of it, I had that question as well about
Yeah.
like what my analyses were,
Yeah.
and I couldn't remember. So it must have been they must have gotten together like all the postdoc people across the program and chosen questions for everyone.
Yeah.
So then they were like, well, they were all shit at answering the questions.
I think I want to ask you guys a question because for me it's a bit different. I didn't do my honor, so I didn't have that honor thing. So you would have already had a small research project. So is that still like, is that what you expected? You would have already some sort of hands-on experience of what like the junior researcher life to be.
I guess so. I mean, the postdoc that I worked for during my honors, like my supervisor, apparently they were super successful and they got like a fellowship really early in their career. But at the time, I didn't know what that meant, and he didn't seem that impressive.
I feel like the honors, it's like a taste of research, but it's not really.
Mm.
You don't get that much. It's pretty much a race to get something done, but it's not really.
So I guess the hardship that you later had in PhD was very different to your honors life.
Mm. Yeah, I think in honors as well, because you also have to balance the subjects that you do, at least in Australia. I don't know about like if our viewers are from the US or like other countries, but in Australia, you do your honors project along with like 3 other subjects or something.
Coursework.
Yeah, and you usually have like a stats thing and then a few other subjects. But I found that was like difficult to balance because research is like it's a whole project and it's a lot of project management. And like if you're doing other stuff, you kind of get distracted and you can't do it as well as you want to, I think.
Yeah, I agree. To talk about why I ended up doing a PhD, I think when we got to honors, there was all this like fear messaging or fear mongering about how competitive the clinical masters is.
Mm.
They're like, oh, first class honors isn't going to cut it. You need publications, you need work experience, etc.
Wow.
So I think I was forced to consider other options.
Mm.
And I had no idea what a PhD was. Like, I think I kind of associated it with lecturing or being an academic at a university, but I didn't know what that was. But this guy one day came to give a talk in one of our honours years units, like one of our capstone units. And he was like kind of clarified the fact that PhD is research and master's is practice.
Mm.
And I was like, fair enough. I think I kind of registered that research I'd be able to help people just on a larger scale compared to doing individual practice.
That's interesting.
And it sounds impressive. That's like honor to my Asian family.
Yeah, that's the same thing as well. Because you get to call yourself a doctor without having to do a med degree.
Oh, and also there was no fees. That's the big one.
That's the other thing as well.
Like the clinical program is ridiculously expensive. Any master, like the organizational side, other ones, forensic side, they were all pretty. It's like 50 grand, right?
Yeah.
And
For
the
2 years.
PhD is free.
Yeah.
Not only is it free, they pay you to do it.
Yeah. I think that was
Which I
one of the
find
things
pretty.
that drew me to it as well. Even though the pay is abysmal.
It's a really poorly paid job. But at the time, when you're a student and they're like, oh, $500 a week, not bad.
But like in my head before my PhD, I thought I can work part-time and do PhD part-time. So I was doing all the numbers. I was like, oh, okay, I can have the extra $500 and tax free.
No, but that's right, because you came from a little bit of a different path.
I've worked for 5 years and then I decided to do a PhD and I started doing thing on Seek. And it was a very lengthy process. It's like you have to do a selection criteria, then you have to do the interview, after the interview, the second round of interview, and then the professor did a really long reference check. So my supervisor had like a 1 hour talk with the professor. Yeah. So, and in my head, once I got a PhD, I can just work from a cafe near the beach and just writing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, I do, but that's one of the things I wanted to say. It's like there's no working hours, but there are working hours. It was a really weird blurred line between being a student and being a worker.
Yeah, I think
Doing
that's what
a
my
PhD.
honors supervisor said as well. Because he was like, I don't know, he went and got like a coffee and was like just chatting with someone in the park. And he was saying that he wouldn't be able to do that if he had like a normal job. And I was like,
Right.
yeah, fair enough. At the time, it sounded impressive, but you know, after everything that we've now gone through and actually working, it's like not worth it.
Why did you want to do a PhD? Because you're working.
Yes. Yeah, so for me, it was because you realize long enough for my work that I can't change anything. The problem is just going to happen over and over again.
Mm.
And I thought that if I'm able to produce something on the high level, I'll be able to influence some systematic change and hence people's lives, that there won't be new family that's impacted by the same issue over and over again. So
Yeah.
that's really, but then I didn't know, I literally didn't know, I literally did not know that the end goal is to publish.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a whole video in and of itself on that.
Yeah.
And that's just really hard for me to get my head around with this goal of coming to PhD, coming to research. So yeah, I think because I didn't know research enough, yeah.
I think a lot of people come in wanting to make a change, like at a real level, and they quickly realize it's more about collecting data and just producing findings, not necessarily that extra translation bit.
Mm.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that if the final product is the publication, then your writing is part of the product.
Yeah.
I used to be super efficient at work, but I'm not careful. Like I just quickly do things and I send it to my manager. No one really cares about like if you want to do a project, like if you have little grammar mistakes in little there and there. But then in research, I did the same thing with my professor, and he was annoying. Like, how can you send this shit
Ah.
to me?
That's a bit harsh. I think that's one of the things we're hoping to address in this podcast, to just give people who don't really know much about the academic experience, like an insight into what it's really like and the challenges that we face.
But it comes down to this thing that the PhD really isn't or wasn't what we were expecting it to be. Like people come into it a lot of the time wanting to make a change, a real change in the world, and then realize how much of an incremental change is made over 4 years of labour.
Yeah, and I think that we sort of have the mix of experiences where you guys come in straight out of honor and I worked for 5 years. But still, like, even though you were in the sort of semi-research space more than me, but it's still different to what you have expected. So what did you, for me, I was like, why do people need that long time to do a PhD? Like, why does it need to be like 4 or 5 years? I don't understand.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things I didn't know until I got into it. In reality, I feel like it's because your supervisors don't give you a lot of time. So
That's right.
you need revisions and you need their comments, but they just don't have time for you because they're so busy doing other stuff. And that's essentially why it takes so long. Even just the admin stuff, yeah.
Everything takes so long.
Yeah.
And there's so many things you have to do. Like you can't just immediately go out and start collecting data. Right? So up to that point, all the stuff you have to do, like gathering the literature review and putting together a plan, getting it approved by your supervisors, and then getting it past ethics, all that kind of stuff. There's just so much.
I remember thinking, like, if I'm doing a research proposal about how I'm going to do the research, it's really just an internal document. But then I think my supervisor expect me to still write a research proposal in a really formal way. And just how I'm going to do the research in the proposal format takes 3-4 months, just going back and forth. So it's just an internal thing. Why does it need to be so?
Yeah. I think,
fine.
yeah, reflecting upon it and with our experience now, I would say it's just because they don't have a lot of time. So they need the proper document. They need something that's like when they read it, they're like, okay, I know exactly what you're doing now. So if there's any any bits that are confusing, they're like, no, this is not good enough.
Was there anything like in those early days that you remember being particularly challenging?
So for me, it was something that I didn't expect to be challenging was just not making money and this feeling that I'm like in that, yeah, like you're poor and like, but it's also like a
we
feeling
were
that you're
so
falling
poor.
behind. I feel like because all my friends, I guess they're pretty high achievers and they all went out and like had careers and like were getting promotions year by year. And I just felt like I wasn't keeping up because I had a scholarship that didn't increase at all and it barely like funded my food. And I just felt like I wasn't achieving that what I should be achieving. And I think I really struggled with that towards my second and third years especially. I was kind of like, gave me the feelings like, oh, is this really worth it? And I think like all PhDs go through that phase in like second or third year where they're kind of like, was this really worth it? Was this the right choice? Because it's a huge commitment.
No, it is.
Yeah, so for me, it's the strong sense of imposter. People around you thinking you're doing a PhD is something amazing, but every day I feel like, shit, when I'm like you're in the office and you just have this emptiness and fear
Oh no.
facing the computer. You know, day by day, and your time is running, like, you know, but you don't know if there's anything concrete that you're doing at the beginning. You're still designing your study. You still don't know what you can or can't do. There wasn't too much information out there. You're supposed to do your own literature review. You're supposed to come up with the studies. And people at the same time saying, oh my God, you're doing a PhD. I'm like, no.
It's so true though, because I think one of the biggest challenges for me in that first year was not having clear deadlines.
Yeah.
Because you go from being a student,
Yeah.
where you have like 4 subjects, 3 assignments a subject, 2 semesters a year, and it's like constantly deadline. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, go do a literature review. Go plan a study for the next 4 years. You know, it's like that was a struggle.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're not doing much. And you're not doing much.
That's true.
And I think this is our future topic, but also in the first year, I think for me, still getting used to being criticized all the time. You just need to get used to it. But like for me at the beginning, everything that I said, sir, is bad. And when you don't have the confidence, and every time you said something, eventually it develops some sort of phobia of sending things.
Dealing with rejection, dealing with feedback, you get plenty of it. And it's hard because everyone that gets into a PhD is basically a high achiever. So you're not used to being told that you've done something wrong or bad. And then all of a sudden
You're a piece of shit.
Highlighted with changes.
But I want to ask you guys, though, with your early first year, did you have someone that really able to say that, you know, it's okay or comfort you and tell you that, you know, what you're feeling, the fear are fine? Is there a figure like that in your workplace, or is it 2 of you that's supporting each other?
I think that my postdoc, so usually when you go into a PhD, you have a panel of supervisors, right? So you have like the big dog, who's usually a professor, and then you usually have like a postdoc, someone in that middle range who's more accessible to you. So the postdoc that was assigned to me was really helpful. She was cool in general, like personable. I think that's a challenge, like because when I started the PhD at least, I felt like I was starting a job.
Yeah.
And like when you're a student, you're like friends with everyone at an intimate level. You're like, it's like being friends, but all of a sudden when you go into the PhD, it's like being colleagues, and there's this like extra level of kind of distance, I guess. And I didn't really feel like I connected with anyone at a personal level, except of course you guys.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
I'm so glad we had each other.
Yeah.
But everyone else, like the people, I guess, in higher levels, like the postdocs and other researchers, I just felt a bit like,
Yeah. I would say that.
But she in particular was good.
Yeah. I think the same with my my postdoc. She was really lovely and she was really helpful. And looking back, I can see like the amount of work that she had to do was insane. But I still felt like I don't think she really helped me understand that, you know, this is normal for a PhD and this is like supposed to happen kind of thing. So like I'm really glad I had like you guys, because you kept me sane and like everyone's sort of on the same level and it's like, okay, this is supposed to take this long kind of thing. Because I've seen like PhD students now who don't have that support network, they don't not doing their PhDs with anyone, and it's a struggle because they don't really know, they're just by themselves.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID, like these people who are trying to start PhDs remotely, I just don't understand how they're doing it. So at least we could physically walk into like the postdoc's office and knock on their door and be like, hey, and ask them questions. And now everything's over email.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is that it's good that we sort of in the same department. Because you really can't compare our PhD with someone that does lab work. And then it will be a very different environment. I think they probably can produce lots of publications and with other work. So if you compare that way, you feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough to get to where other people are in their second year or third year who are already publishing.
Really just shit together. Like the blind leading the blind. I think another kind of thing that really stood out in those early months and weeks was its adjustment to an office environment. Like I'd been a receptionist for a clinic and things like that, but I'd never really been in that kind of an academic office mode, and it was a big learning curve for me. Even like, oh, is this milk free? Like, like how do you engage in small talk at the appropriate level? You have to say good morning to everyone every morning that you walk in, like all those little things, and you can't,
introvert learns how to work.
And, and how to use the appropriate terms, because it's definitely an appropriate level of speaking in the academic research environment. Like you can't just walk into the office and be like, "What's up, bitches?"
I don't think you can do that in any office.
True. But I think with some like corporate environments, there's more kind of thinking about that goes on.
Yeah, but I think you can do that with the people of your level. Like you could do that with us, but you can't do that with your supervisor.
Yeah. But even now in my new group, where I'm researching at the moment, I don't have that. I have that with maybe one person. In general.
Did you guys look up the people that you're going to work with before you start the job?
I looked at my supervisor.
Yeah, I think I looked at my supervisor.
He was the only one I had information on.
All right.
He looked so scary in the photo. I was like, holy crap, this guy's going to like have to drive. Like, it's so scary. But it was really nice in the interview.
Oh, yeah. I looked up everyone on the official website, and because I was trying to suss out who I can be friends with and learn a bit about them so I can be friends with them. Yes.
Did you identify targets for friendship?
Yes.
Oh my god. I did that in high school. I did that like throughout my. It's like a strategic introvert way of surviving. It's just like I seek out the person that's by themselves, and I'm like, yes, you will be my friend. And like deliberately sit next to them and be like really nice to them, and it's like, yes, you've fallen into my trap.
Is this what you did to me?
I want to, but you just like were not ready to socialize. You just did not want to be there. Fucking, you didn't even want to share an office with us. You're like, no, I want that one down the hall that's by myself. So, like, looking back, is there things that you guys wish you knew about doing a PhD before you started?
I guess this is a whole other discussion in itself, but the reality of post-PhD options is a big one.
Yeah.
Like if I knew what I was in for, then I think maybe I would have given it a bit more thought. Because I feel like, especially with academia, with anything really, the race starts during the PhD. So the more stuff you have built up before you graduate, the better position you'll be.
Yeah.
So
no one tells you that. Yeah.
Yeah, no one tells you that. Like, and in uni or any other thing, you just need to be good at what you're doing now and get it done. But it's different with a PhD, and you have to have as much under your belt.
Mm.
What about you, X?
For me, it's the like the sort of interpersonal skill that required for that. It's very different. Understanding the power dynamic and when it's the right time to push for it, when it's
Yes.
time to be humble, and then sort of how when you're stuck in the struggle and your supervisor is not giving you feedback, how do you navigate that emotion? Because for me, it was such an emotional journey, which I did not expect, because I thought that I'm already very equipped as a person to deal with hardship.
Mm.
Like, surely PhD, how can it be like emotionally?
Yeah.
Emotionally, how hard can it be, right?
Yeah, you have to be very resilient.
Yes.
So there
Do you
was,
feel like you're much more resilient?
yeah. So that was something else I think we're going to talk about a bit later on as well. But I definitely like it hardens you up, like going through this trial by fire.
Yeah.
So I actually have a story about this. So, and I think like Y already knows this. So I had a family friend who wanted to start a PhD, and they wanted me to give them some advice about, you know, PhD life and what it's like. So I didn't know this until later, but her whole family is like academics or something. And I'm like, why are you even asking me then? But anyway, I think because she wanted to do a PhD in Australia or something. And so I just gave her, I think it was like second year of my PhD. So I was really, really real, right? I was in the depths and I was like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, there's not a lot of job prospects out there. And it's like, it's hard to like get a fellowship, like grants, like the rate it's like very, very low, right? So difficult. So you have to be really passionate about what you do, and you have to be really sure before you start this. And she was like, bro, you sound like super disillusioned. Are you okay? I was like, I'm just trying to tell you
I'm not okay. Need a freaking mental well-being day.
But I'm just being real with you. This is like exactly what it's like. She was like, oh, but you know, my dad seems pretty happy, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you know what? Fuck you. Like, I'm just, but yeah. I don't know if she ended up doing a PhD.
Like, did you focus on when you're telling her, like giving her advice? Was it mostly about the post-PhD job prospects?
I think it was just like, she was just like, what is it like doing a PhD in Australia? And I was just like, this is what it's like, you know. And yeah, it's like, this is what you should know going in that no one tells you. It's not a stable career. And it's really hard to get funding afterwards. And a lot of it is determined by factors that you don't think. Like when you go into it, at least for me, I wanted like to help people essentially. Like it's like science, right? You just like you do the research and you're really passionate about it, you make a finding and it helps people. But that's really not what it's about. Like it's very much metrics based. So it's like the number of publications you have, the amount of money you can bring in. It's just like no one tells you that's what it is. But like I mean, the people who are really lucky are the people who like can align those two things. So they're really passionate about the thing they do and they can get a lot of money for it. But like most people, it's a game you have to play essentially.
Yeah. And also, like, if you be passionate about something, it has to be the area that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
But when you're first coming out of the PhD, you're like hopping on projects. You don't have much choice to be necessarily in the field that you are the most passionate about. And it depends on, you know, whether the project is going well and whether they want you to do things, you know, for your own academic career. You may not able to have the opportunity to sit there for 12 months, you move on to another project.
Point. Do you guys think it's important or affects your future, like to start a PhD in the particular field that you're interested in? So there are different ways you can start a PhD, right? You can get the grades and then you write to people, like professors or people in different fields that you're particularly interested in about a project.
Yeah.
Or in our cases, we all found our opportunities online, where basically the PhD is kind of already preset.
Yeah.
It's a bit free. There's a bit of freedom, but you get a topic. And like for me, like I was completely new to
the field that you.
The field was new. But in a broad sense, it was still, I guess, helping a marginalized population, which is what I wanted to do. But I feel like what we did during the PhD did define a lot of, it kind of restricts the types of studies and opportunities you get afterwards. Like you can't suddenly jump to a completely different field or...
Well, I did.
Yeah,
No, I
that's true.
think it's still within...
It's within health and within. It depends on
Yeah.
how you argue it, really. But I find that most of them, because I didn't have any experience in the field that I currently work in, but the experience that they were looking for was like stuff I'd already sort of done doing my PhD anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't think it matters too much. You just have to, in the interview, you just have to make up some bullshit about why you're interested in this new topic, really.
I think I would argue that it's more important to find a good supervisor than it is to find the right topic.
Yes,
Like that will
100%
define
agreed.
your experience.
yeah. And I know people go around and interviewing supervisors before they start their PhD. Like, really talking to other people in the lab and knowing what sort of how the supervisor works with them. Because some supervisors don't really give much suggestions, and there are people like just micromanaging, like any manager. But you need to know who suits your style.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of like when I first started looking for a PhD. I think I did do it that way. I approached someone because I was interested in the topic and because they were like an expert in the topic. And I was like, oh, can you help me, apply for a PhD? And they were like, yep, totally on board. I had like a meeting with them. It was great. And then I didn't hear anything from them, basically. I was like, can you help me with this like research proposal? Can you help me with the scholarship application? Heard absolutely nothing. And later on I found out this is like common to this person. This person in particular, like people who've been supervised by this person, they're like, yeah, you cannot get any kind of response out of them. They're like the worst supervisor ever. So in reality, I dodged a bullet. But I think, I think a lot of people, I don't know who actually goes out there with like a project idea. It's like, yes, I want to approach the supervisor because they're an expert in this field. I feel like a lot of people these days, the people I know at least, they do PhDs because the money comes up. The project comes up and there's a scholarship attached to it. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll just do this PhD then.
The like professor I'm working with now, he still gets a lot of like cold calls saying, do you have spots? Can we work towards putting in a PhD proposal, especially from overseas, which is
overseas I find as well.
Overseas.
Yeah.
But even here, and he gets a lot of students because he does teaching in undergraduate courses. So I think they kind of like what they see.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then I think like hit him up afterwards.
Yeah.
And also because it's an interesting area.
Yeah, because I switched universities. I think we all switched universities. We didn't do undergrad in the same place that we did our PhD, so we didn't know who the professors were. So we didn't take any of their classes or anything. So I think that's probably why as well.
Yeah.
Do you guys regret doing a PhD?
In short, no. I think
You're gonna elaborate?
I embrace my destiny. And like
a protagonist.
Shit things. But like I feel like the experiences that I got doing a PhD were really valuable, especially this whole resilience thing. Like dealing with feedback, dealing with rejection. Like I feel like I'm a completely different person now than I was in the beginning. Like I was so much more timid. Like I've learned to be assertive, which is one of the things that like doctorates was saying, like learning when to speak up for yourself. Like it didn't come naturally to like speak up for myself or to bother people about getting feedback or asking for things. So these kinds of lessons that I learned, I think, were valuable. And also, research is fun. Like you get a lot of creative license. It's intellectually stimulating. So no. How about you, Dr. X?
Yeah. So for me, in general, it's I don't regret anything sort of in life, but there's definitely
no regrets.
I'm the psychological healthy being. But there are definitely moments in my PhD I questioned, like for what I want to achieve, whether that's PhD is the right way to achieve it, given that I want to make impact, and whether this 5-6 years, and given my personality wanting to connect with people, so whether that's the right way to do it. So I think I spoke to other people in the sort of same department, and it's very clear that we really believe that people should know what they getting into and your goal from doing this PhD. Otherwise, it is 4 or 5 years of your life. So it is a decision not to take lightly. And that 4 or 5 years, as Dr. was saying, I forgot my train of thought.
As Dr. Z was saying.
Yeah, I forgot what I was trying to say. That Dr. My God. Yeah, I can't remember. I lost my train of thoughts. But in general, I don't regret it. But I hope that, everyone can make informed decision going into it than just thinking, it's going to be cool. You will be on minimum wage for 5 years. And if you're doing your, early 20s and 30s, it is a very, important stage of your life. So it should be an informed decision.
You hit a lot of key milestones while you're doing it. Which is why it's important to have a group of friends.
Yeah.
We had to deal with so much shit together. Like living alone for the first time, breaking up with our boyfriends.
I'm single and ready to mingle now.
What about you, Dr. Zing?
Yeah. So same as you guys, there was definitely times during my PhD when I questioned whether it's the right choice. But, ultimately looking back, I don't regret it. I get to call myself a doctor, so it makes my parents proud, even though they don't really know what I do. And now I think because I'm financially stable and I have a better mindset, and it's just I think I can look at it with rose tinted glasses now almost. And it also led me to meet you guys. So, I don't regret it. So, any advice for people out there, who might be thinking about starting a PhD, and whether they should or should not do a PhD?
I think everything we've said, consider that it's like a job, it's a long-term commitment. Most people extend. So I think when I started, I was like, okay, 3 years, easy. Usually 3.5 at least. Expect it to be 4, including your extension and submission and all that. So it's a long-term thing.
And I think
if you can, suss out your supervisors.
Yes. Knowing how little power that you had in this, I think is important as well. Because for me as well, I was like, 3 years, easy, I can manage it. I can, be as productive as I wish to be and finish it on time. But most of the time are things out of my control. And while you're waiting, if you give yourself that strict timeline, and you will get so frustrated and become, procrastinating and getting really, annoying with the project. But you just need to understand that there will be time where you don't really have much to do. You're waiting for other people's response, and it's okay. And there'll be a time that you just have to do everything within a month.
That's really important, that time management. You have to be a self-starter. You have to be comfortable working with minimal supervision and figuring out what you need to do all the time and reassessing your timelines all the time.
Yes.
Wise words.
And your success and your progress depends a lot on other people.
Yes.
A lot more than you would like it to.
Yes. Because in the PhD, I'll meet people that finish their PhD in 2 years.
What?
And,
all these psychopaths.
Yeah, but they're strong-minded people that already work in the field for 10 years. It's more like the supervisors supporting them than they need anything from the supervisor. So they'd be able to publish something that on a project they've already worked on with WHO and has 3 publications and push everything out within 2 years. But knowing that's a very rare circumstance. Most of the time that we're not in control of that timeline at all. Dr. Zing, your last words. Did you say why you should do a PhD?
I think I give you the same advice I gave you to that bitch who probably didn't listen to me. Um, yeah, I mean, if you're really passionate about it, I'd say, go for it. Just be aware that, it's not a stable field. It's, everything I've already said, basically. But I don't, yeah, like the three of us don't regret doing a PhD. And you get a lot of great times out of it. You meet a lot of great people. It just becomes like part of your life and part of who you are.
Some of the good things.
I think we'll save that for another episode. But we can do it. We can, if you want to say stuff. Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of good things to do with PhD as well. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of perks. I know, traveling overseas, that was my biggest thing because I love to travel. So you get funding to just go overseas or a conference, which basically I didn't attend because I just spent doing tourist stuff where I should have been listening to talks.
We were just lurking by the catering table.
Free food. Sandwiches for days. What other perks?
And you are surrounded by intellectually engaged people. So even the conversation, random conversation within my office is quite interesting. I think in my other workplace, we don't really talk about this sort of engaging topic. But people do reflect on things. It is a sort of people engage in certain logic framework after you've done your PhD to reflect on social things, and most people have a much more insightful understanding of the world. So the conversation was quite interesting most of the time.
Yeah. So it's really intellectually stimulating.
Sometimes too much.
Yeah. Sometimes you just want to start shooting. Which is why you need your mates as well. Do you guys think if you went back in time and had to choose something other than the PhD, what would you have done?
Well, I tried that and no one wanted me.
I think it's a little bit different to when we graduated.
Yeah.
There are lots more opportunities in like human factors, user experience. I think there's a broader use for your psych degree.
I probably wouldn't still go into clinical psychology, even though I also did a psychology degrey. That sort of one-on-one setting doesn't really work for me.
People.
I think that constantly people paying you all this money to solve their finance problem. And so for me, the reward is quite low. But I want to be in a position where within government you have the power to sort of decide how the program gonna run or the money who you commission to. That type of role will be attractive.
How about you? Why?
I didn't think about it. If I went back and I had to do something else other than the PhD, I think org psych would be pretty interesting. Because it's still a balance between investigating, so like research and answering questions, but also making a change. That's not necessarily just about all about mental health.
Should we finish up there?
Alright, so that wraps up our video for today. We hope you found it somewhat useful and or entertaining. So please use the comments to share with us what you found challenging or particularly surprising about your PhD experience. Or if you're on the fence about starting one, feel free to shoot us any questions you have. Also, if you know anything about academia, you know our eternal thirst for acceptance and validation. So please show us you care by hitting the like and subscribe buttons below. See you next time.